The town of Red Hollow sat beneath a sky that never seemed to soften. Dust clung to everything: boots, windows, lungs, and the wind carried whispers faster than it carried hope. By sunset, the streets glowed in a tired amber light, and that was when she walked through them, alone as always. Moved quietly, her worn shoes scraping against the dry earth. At 28, she carried a strange contradiction: a face that could have belonged to a painting and eyes that had seen far too much to ever be soft again. Men noticed her. Women judged her. No one welcomed her. They spoke in low voices as she passed. Still here. She should left long ago. Trouble follows that one. Heard it all, she always did, but she never stopped walking. Once she had belonged to this town. Once she had been the daughter of a man people respected, a man whose word meant something. Her father had been strong, steady, and kind in a way that made others feel smaller without ever intending to. When he died, something in Red Hollow shifted. Respect turned to silence. Silence turned to suspicion. No one ever said it outright, but blame has a way of finding a face, and somehow it found hers. After his death, the house that had once been her shelter became her prison. Her stepmother wasted no time reshaping the world around her. Where there had once been warmth, there was now cold instruction. Where there had been laughter, there was now sharp, cutting silence. "You eat too much," her stepmother would say, even when barely touched her plate. "You bring nothing," she would add, even when worked from dawn until nightfall. Every day became a quiet punishment. Scrubbed floors until her hands cracked, cooked meals she was barely allowed to eat, and endured words that left deeper wounds than any blade could. "You were the last one to see him," her stepmother once whispered, her voice low and venomous. "Funny how he died right after." Never answered. There was no defense against something people had already decided to believe. Weeks turned into months. The house grew smaller, as if the walls themselves had chosen sides. And then one morning, without warning or ceremony, her stepmother ended it. "You're not staying here anymore," she said, standing in the doorway with a look of finality. Blinked, her hands still damp from washing dishes. "Where will I go?" "That's not my concern." There was no argument, no farewell. Just a small bundle of her belongings dropped at her feet, and a door that closed behind her with a sound that echoed longer than it should have. The town watched as she stepped into the street with nowhere to go. At first, she tried to survive with dignity. She went from shop to shop, her voice steady despite the exhaustion pressing against her ribs. "I'm looking for work," she would say. Not charity, not sympathy, just work. But doors closed quickly. "We don't need help. Try somewhere else. This isn't a place for you." Sometimes the refusal came with pity. More often, it came with discomfort. Her beauty unsettled people. It made women wary and men unsure of their intentions. In a town like Red Hollow, anything that didn't fit neatly into expectation was pushed aside. Days blurred together. Hunger became a quiet companion. Sleep turned into something she borrowed rather than owned. An hour here, a moment there, wherever she could find shelter from the wind. One evening, as the sky cracked open with thunder, found herself at the edge of a crumbling barn. Rain poured in relentless sheets, turning the ground to mud beneath her feet. She hesitated only a moment before slipping inside. The air smelled of hay and damp wood. It wasn't much, but it was dry. She sank down against the wall, pulling her thin shawl around her shoulders. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to stop moving. The silence was heavy. It was in that silence that the thoughts crept in, the kind she usually outran. What if this was all there was? What if the town was right? What if she truly didn't belong anywhere? Her throat tightened, but no tears came. She had run out of those long ago. The storm raged outside, indifferent to her existence. Wind howled through the broken boards and cold seeped into her bones. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to escape the weight of being awake. "I don't need kindness," she whispered to no one, "just work." The words felt hollow now, like something she had repeated too many times to believe. Morning came slowly. The storm passed, leaving behind a world that looked no different than before, only wetter, colder, and just as unwelcoming. Stepped out of the barn, her body stiff, her stomach aching. The town stretched before her, unchanged in its quiet rejection. She could stay. She could keep asking, keep enduring the same closed doors, the same whispers, the same invisible walls that boxed her in. Or she could leave. The thought settled in her chest with a strange kind of clarity. There was nothing left for her here. As she walked toward the edge of town, a passing rider slowed just enough to glance her way. "You heading out?" he asked. Nodded. He hesitated, then said, "There's a ranch a few miles west. Big place. Owner keeps to himself. Folks say he's not right in the head." She said nothing. "He might be looking for help," the man added with a shrug. "Or he might throw you out, hard to say." Met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Does he pay?" The man gave a short, surprised laugh. "If you last long enough to earn it." That was enough. She didn't ask for directions. West was all she needed. As Red Hollow faded behind her, didn't look back. There was nothing there worth remembering, only echoes of a life that had already been taken from her. The road ahead was uncertain, stretching into land she had never seen, toward a man she had never met. But uncertainty was better than rejection. Anything was better than staying where she was unwanted. Her steps were slow but steady. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't walking in circles. She was walking toward something, even if she didn't yet know what it was. The land changed long before the ranch came into view. Dusty roads gave way to open plains, wide and unforgiving, stretching beneath a sky that felt larger than anything had ever known. The wind moved differently here, stronger, cleaner, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant water. By the time she saw the ranch, her legs ached and her throat burned, but she did not stop. It stood alone against the horizon. A sprawling structure of weathered wood, surrounded by fences that seemed to run for miles. Horses grazed in the distance, and a few cattle moved lazily under the fatting sun. There was no sign of life at first glance, only silence and scale. It felt less like a home and more like a place that swallowed people whole. Approached slowly, her steps cautious but determined. Before she reached the main house, she felt it, that sensation of being watched. Then she saw him. He stepped out from behind the barn as if he had always been there, part of the land itself. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, broad-shouldered, his presence heavy and immovable. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of a worn hat, but there was nothing uncertain about the way he looked at her. Caleb Boone. She did not know his name yet, but she understood the rumors instantly. This was not a man people easily approached. Stopped a few feet away, forcing herself to hold his gaze. Her exhaustion threatened to betray her, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm looking for work." He said nothing. The silence stretched long enough to make most people turn back. Didn't. She had come too far to retreat now. "I don't need kindness," she added, "just work." His eyes shifted slightly, studying her, not the way others had, not with judgment or suspicion, but with something quieter, measuring, considering. For a moment, she thought he might tell her to leave. Instead, he turned without a word and walked toward the house. Stood there uncertain. Then his voice reached her, low and firm. "Come inside." It wasn't an invitation. It was a decision. Inside, the house was simpler than she expected. Clean but not polished, functional. A place built for living, not for impressing. He gestured toward the table. "Sit." She hesitated. "I asked for work." "You'll eat first." The statement left no room for argument. Sat slowly, her body tense, as he placed a plate in front of her. The smell alone made her stomach twist with hunger, but she didn't reach for it immediately. "Why?" she asked quietly. Caleb paused, his expression unreadable. "Because you need it." She studied him, searching for mockery, pity, anything that might explain it. She found none. Carefully, she began to eat. He didn't watch her the way others would have. He moved around the room, tending to small tasks as if her presence changed nothing. That, more than anything, unsettled her. When she finished, she set the plate aside. "I can work now." He nodded once. "You will." That was how it began. The days that followed were unlike anything had known. The work was hard, but it was honest. She cleaned, cooked, carried water, and learned the rhythms of the ranch. There was always something to be done, and for the first time in months, her hands had purpose. Caleb spoke little. When he did, his words were direct, stripped of unnecessary weight. He gave instructions without harshness and correction without humiliation. He did not hover, nor did he ignore her. He simply allowed her to exist. At first, waited for it to change. Kindness in her experience always came with a cost, a condition, a moment where it would be withdrawn, leaving her worse than before. But the days passed and nothing shifted. One morning she found a pair of boots outside her door, sturdy, her size, far better than the ones she had arrived in. She didn't ask where they came from. She already knew. Another evening, after a long day in the fields, she returned to find a blanket folded neatly on her bed, warmer than anything she had owned in years. Small things, quiet things, things that said more than words ever could. It confused her. "You don't have to do that," she said one night, standing in the doorway as Caleb repaired a broken harness. He didn't look up. "Do what?" "Treat me like," she trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Like you work here," he said. Frowned slightly. "Like I matter." That made him pause. For a moment, the room felt different, as if something unspoken had shifted between them. He set the harness aside and met her gaze. "You do," he said simply. The words settled into her chest in a way she didn't know how to handle. Turned away first. Trust did not come easily to her. Even as the ranch began to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like something steady, she kept a part of herself guarded, waiting, watching. There were things about Caleb that didn't fit neatly into what she saw. Sometimes she caught him looking at her, not in the way others had, but with a weight that felt older than their acquaintance, as if he knew something she didn't. And then there were the locked doors. One room in particular remained closed at all times. He never mentioned it and she never asked. But curiosity has a way of growing in silence. One afternoon, while searching for tools, found herself near that door. It was slightly ajar. She hesitated. Then slowly she pushed it open. Inside, the room was dim, filled with dust and memory. Papers covered the desk, and on the wall hung a map of land she didn't recognize. Her eyes moved over the details, lines, markings, names. Then she saw it. A letter. Folded, worn, but unmistakable. She stepped closer, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. Her breath caught as she read the name at the bottom. Her father. The room seemed to close in around her. Footsteps sounded behind her. Turned sharply, the letter still clutched in her hand. Caleb stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You knew him," she said, her voice barely steady. The silence that followed was heavier than any she had felt before. And in that moment, everything changed. The letter trembled in his hand as if it carried a pulse of its own. The ink had faded in places, but the signature was unmistakable. Her father's name stood at the bottom, firm and deliberate, as though he had written it without fear of what might follow. Caleb remained in the doorway, unmoving. "You knew him," repeated, her voice sharper now, cutting through the thick air. A long silence answered her before he finally spoke. Yes. The single word struck harder than denial ever could. Took a step back, her chest tightening. How? She demanded. And why didn't you tell me? Caleb's jaw shifted slightly, tension flickering across his face. Because you weren't ready to hear it. Her eyes burned, anger rising fast enough to drown everything else. That wasn't your decision to make. No, he said quietly, but I made it anyway. The honesty in his voice only made it worse. Looked down at the letter again, scanning lines she had barely processed before. Words about land, about trust, about danger. Her father's handwriting carried urgency she had never seen in him before. You were part of this, she said slowly, piecing it together. Whatever happened, you were there. Caleb stepped into the room, closing the distance just enough for his presence to feel unavoidable. I was. The truth settled like a weight between them. He trusted you, whispered, her voice breaking at the edges. He wrote to you. Yes. And he still died. That landed harder than anything else. Caleb didn't flinch, but something in his eyes shifted, something deeper than guilt, something closer to regret carved into bone. I tried to stop it, he said. I failed. Shook her head, backing away again. That's not enough. I know. Her thoughts spiraled, anger twisting with grief she had buried long ago. All this time, she said, her voice rising, you knew who I was, you knew what happened, and you said nothing. I was watching, he replied. Watching, she echoed, disbelief cutting through her tone. While I was thrown out, while I had nothing. His silence answered her in a way words couldn't. Why? She demanded. Caleb exhaled slowly, as if the truth itself carried weight. Because your father asked me to. The room went still. Blinked, her anger faltering for just a moment. What? He knew something was coming, Caleb continued. He didn't know when or how, but he knew he wouldn't be able to protect you himself. His grip tightened on the letter. He came to me, Caleb said, asked me to keep an eye on you from a distance, to step in if things got worse. Her mind struggled to keep up. Then why didn't you, she pressed. Why didn't you come sooner? Caleb's gaze didn't waver. Because I thought you were safe. A bitter laugh escaped her. Safe, she repeated. You call that safe? I didn't know how far it had gone, he said. By the time I did, you were already gone. The words hit her like a second blow. I came to the town, he added, too late. Silence filled the space again, heavier than before. Turned away, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Everything she had believed, about her father, about her past, about her suffering, shifted under the weight of this new truth. You should have told me, she said, her voice quieter now but no less firm. Yes, Caleb answered. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. And now, she asked, what happens now? Before he could answer, a sound cut through the tension. Hooves. Fast, urgent. Both of them turned toward the window. Dust rose in the distance, forming a line of riders heading straight for the ranch. Caleb's expression hardened instantly. Inside, he said. Didn't move. Who are they? I was hoping you'd never have to find out, he replied. The riders reached the gate within moments, their presence aggressive, deliberate. At the front rode a woman knew all too well. Her stepmother. Even from a distance, the cold certainty in her posture was unmistakable. She found you, murmured. She found what she thought she lost, Caleb corrected. The riders dismounted, spreading out as if they already owned the land. Pulse quickened, but something inside her had shifted. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. Stay behind me, Caleb said, moving toward the door. No, replied. He glanced at her. I'm done hiding, she said. For a moment he studied her, then he nodded once. They stepped outside together. Her stepmother's eyes locked onto her immediately, sharp and calculating. "There you are," she said, her voice carrying across the distance. "I was beginning to think you disappeared for good." Didn't flinch, you didn't look very hard. A flicker of irritation crossed the older woman's face. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." Lifted the letter slightly. "You mean the truth." The tension snapped. Voices rose, accusations thrown like weapons. But stood her ground, her voice cutting through the noise as she spoke. About her father, about the betrayal, about everything that had been hidden. For the first time, people listened. And for the first time, her stepmother faltered. Caleb remained beside her, a steady presence, but he didn't speak for her. He didn't need to. Finished what had started long before she ever walked to this ranch. When it was over, the riders left with far less certainty than they had arrived with. The truth had a way of doing that. Silence returned to the ranch, but it felt different now. Lighter. Stood there for a long moment, the weight she had carried for years finally easing. "It's over," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "It is." She looked at him then, not with anger, not with suspicion, but with something new, something steadier. "You gave me work," she said. "And more than that," he replied. Allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "I think I finally understand." The sun began to rise again, stretching light across the land. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone.